The auction hall fell silent as the auctioneer's hammer struck 3 times. Eva Bellini stood trembling on the marble platform, her wrists bound, her literature textbooks now scattered across an apartment she'd never see again. 50 million. 75 million. The bids climbed as faceless men appraised her like livestock. Then the double doors exploded open. Dante Rinaldi entered, 6 feet of controlled violence in a tailored suit, his presence commanding instant submission. He didn't glance at the other bidders. His dark eyes locked onto Ava's terrified gaze. $100 million, he announced, his voice cold as winter stone. The bidding is over. Before we begin this story of power, captivity, and unexpected redemption, hit that like button and comment with your city below, so I can see how far this tale travels across the world. The price of a life. The morning Eva Bellini's life shattered began like any other Thursday in Milan. She sat in the corner of Café Letterario, her favorite cafe near the Università degli Studi, surrounded by dog-eared paperbacks and a notebook filled with half-finished story ideas. At 22, Ava lived in the margins, overlooked, underestimated, invisible to most people who passed her on the street. She preferred it that way. Her world consisted of literature classes, weekend shifts at a bookstore, and the precious hours she spent sketching in Parco Sempione, imagining characters for novels she dreamed of writing someday. Her phone buzzed against the scarred wooden table. Papa. She frowned. Her father rarely called during the day. Papa, is everything all right? The silence on the other end stretched too long. When Marco Bellini finally spoke, his voice carried a tremor she'd never heard before. Eva Piccola mia, I need you to come home, right now. What's wrong? Are you sick? Please, just come home. The line went dead. Ava's coffee sat forgotten as she gathered her books with shaking hands. Her father, usually so jovial, so full of terrible jokes and bear hugs, had sounded terrified. She caught the next tram across the city, watching Milan's elegant architecture blur past the windows while dread coiled tighter in her stomach. Their apartment occupied the 3rd floor of a tired building in Porta Romana, nothing like the grand residences near the Duomo. Ava took the stairs 2 at a time, her messenger bag banging against her hip. The door stood slightly ajar. Papa? She pushed inside and froze. Her father sat at their small kitchen table, his face ashen, his hands clasped before him as if in prayer. But he wasn't alone. 2 men in expensive suits flanked him, one lean and sharp-featured, the other built like a concrete wall. Neither smiled. Ava, her father stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. What's happening? Who are these people? The lean man studied her with cold calculation, his gaze traveling from her worn canvas sneakers to her oversized cardigan to the paint stain on her jeans. Miss Bellini, your father has found himself in a difficult financial situation. Financial situation? Ava looked between the strangers and her father's anguished face. Papa, what is he talking about? Marco Bellini seemed to age a decade in that moment. I made mistakes, Ava. Terrible mistakes. I thought I could fix things, make back what I lost, but I only made it worse. How much worse? 3 million euros, the lean man supplied smoothly. Plus interest accrued over 18 months. Your father borrowed from my employers to cover gambling debts. He promised collateral he didn't possess. He made guarantees he couldn't keep. 3 million euros. The number was so absurd that Ava almost laughed. Her father managed a small import business that barely kept them fed. Where would he get 3 million euros? There has to be some mistake, she said. We don't have that kind of money. We've never had that kind of money. Precisely the problem. The man's smile didn't reach his eyes. Which is why we're here to collect alternative compensation. Something in his tone made Ava's skin crawl. She backed toward the door. I think you should leave. We'll contact a lawyer, work out some kind of payment plan. The concrete wall of a man moved faster than seemed possible for someone his size. He blocked her exit, his massive frame filling the doorway. Papa? Ava's voice climbed higher. I'm sorry, her father whispered again, and she saw tears streaming down his weathered face. I thought I had more time. I thought I could fix this before they came for you. Came for me? What does that mean? The lean man stood, adjusting his cufflinks with practiced precision. Your father offered you as collateral, Miss Bellini. When he couldn't repay his debt, he signed papers transferring certain rights to our organization. That's insane. You can't just trade people. You'd be surprised what's possible when proper channels are observed. The documents are all legally binding. Your father's signature, witnessed and notarized. You belong to us now. The room tilted. Ava grabbed the back of a chair to steady herself. Papa, tell me this isn't real. Tell me you didn't. I had no choice. Marco surged to his feet. They were going to kill me, Ava. They were going to cut me apart and dump me in the Naviglio. I thought if I just had more time, I could win it back, make everything right. So you sold your daughter? Ava's voice broke. You sold me to criminals? We prefer to think of ourselves as debt collectors, the lean man said, though the distinction hardly matters at this point. Collect her. Everything happened too fast. The large man grabbed Ava's arm with bruising force. She screamed, kicking and clawing, her literature books scattering across the floor. Her father shouted something, but the words dissolved into chaos. She caught glimpses of her small life. The bookshelf she'd painted mint green, the photographs of her mother who'd died when Ava was 8, the sketch of Sforza Castle she'd been so proud of, all of it fragmenting as she was dragged toward the door. Let me go! Someone help! Help! A cloth pressed over her mouth and nose, chemical sweet and suffocating. Ava fought to hold her breath, but her lungs eventually betrayed her. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was her father's face, crumpled with guilt and self-loathing, as he watched his only daughter disappear. Ava woke to the purr of an engine and the smell of leather. Her head throbbed, her mouth tasted like copper, and when she tried to move, she discovered her wrists were zip-tied together. Panic flooded through her as consciousness returned. She was in the back of a luxury car, some sleek black vehicle with tinted windows and seats softer than her bed at home. The lean man sat beside her, scrolling through his phone with casual indifference. The concrete wall drove. Where are you taking me? Ava's voice came out hoarse. Where are we going? Monaco, the man said without looking up. You'll want to stay quiet and cooperative. Things will be much easier for everyone. Monaco? That's another country. You can't just kidnap people across international borders. And yet here we are. He finally glanced at her, and his smile was pure ice. I suggest you save your energy, Miss Bellini. You'll need it for what comes next. Terror crystallized into something sharp and cold in Ava's chest. She stared out the window, watching the Italian countryside blur into French highway, then the winding coastal roads that led to the principality. Questions multiplied in her mind, each more horrifying than the last. What did they plan to do with her? Would they force her to work off her father's debt? How long would that take? Years? Decades? The alternative possibilities were too terrible to consider. They arrived in Monaco after midnight. Ava had been to the tiny nation once, on a school trip, marveling at the ostentatious wealth on display. Now being dragged from the car into an underground garage beneath a building that screamed money, she saw only menace in the glittering excess. Move! The large man hauled her toward an elevator, her zip-tied hands making balance impossible. They ascended in silence. The elevator doors opened onto a hallway lined with art that probably cost more than her father's entire lifetime earnings. At the end, double doors stood guarded by 2 more men in dark suits. They nodded to her captors and stepped aside. The doors opened onto a nightmare masquerading as luxury. The space beyond resembled a private auction house. All marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and velvet curtains, the color of old blood. Rows of leather chairs faced a raised platform, and those chairs were filling with men. Wealthy men, powerful men, men whose tailored suits and cold eyes marked them as predators who'd never known consequence. A woman in an evening gown that probably cost what Ava made in a year approached them, her smile professionally blank. Catalog number 17. You're just in time. They're about to begin. Ava tried to pull away, but the concrete wall's grip was absolute. What is this? What's happening? The lean man finally showed genuine emotion. Amusement. Surely you've figured it out by now, Miss Bellini. You're the merchandise. This is where we recover our losses. Before she could scream, before she could fight or run or do anything, she was pushed through a side door into a small holding room. 5 other women waited there, all around her age, all wearing the same expression of terrified disbelief. Some cried silently. Others stared at nothing, shock rendering them blank. A woman in a severe black suit entered, clipboard in hand. Listen carefully. You will go onto the platform when called. You will stand where you're told. You will not speak unless directly addressed. Any outburst, any attempt to flee, will result in immediate punishment. Am I understood? No one answered. The reality was too enormous, too impossible. I said, Am I understood? A chorus of broken whispers. Yes. Good. First up. Number 12. Ava watched a girl no older than 20 be led through the curtains onto the platform. Through the gap, she could hear the auctioneer's smooth voice, the rustle of men settling into their seats, the horrifying normalcy of it all, as if they were bidding on art or racehorses instead of human beings. 300,000 euros? Do I hear 350? Ava's knees buckled. Someone caught her. Another girl, maybe 19, with red-rimmed eyes and trembling hands. Breathe, she whispered. If you pass out, they'll just drag you up there anyway. This can't be real. This can't be happening. I thought the same thing 3 hours ago. One by one, the women were led onto the platform. One by one, Ava heard the bids, the casual discussion of terms, the crisp strike of the auctioneer's hammer. Sold, sold, sold. Then they called number 17. The severe woman gripped Ava's arm. Show time, darling. Try to look pretty. It'll fetch a better price. Ava's legs refused to cooperate. She was half dragged through the curtains onto the platform, and the lights hit her like a physical force. Beyond the glare, she could make out maybe 30 men seated in the audience. Older men, mostly. Men who looked at her the way someone might appraise a painting, with detached interest and cold calculation. Lot 17, the auctioneer announced, his voice cultured and pleasant, as if describing a piece of antique furniture. 22 years old, Milan origin, university educated. Catalog lists her as particularly skilled in creative pursuits, literature, art, etc. Excellent health, no significant medical history. Shall we start the bidding at 200,000 euros? Ava's vision swam. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. Any moment she'd wake up in her bed in Porta Romana, late for class, laughing at the absurdity of the nightmare. 200,000 from bidder 7, but the nightmare didn't end. The bids climbed, 250, 300, 400,000 euros. Men raising numbered paddles as casually as if ordering wine. Ava searched the faces she could see, looking for something human, some flicker of conscience or compassion. She found only appetite and greed. 600,000 from bidder 12. Ava's breathing came too fast, too shallow. Black spots danced at the edges of her vision. She was going to pass out. She was going to collapse on this platform while strangers decided her fate, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. 750,000 from bidder 19. The auctioneer smiled. Excellent. Do I hear 800,000? The double doors at the back of the auction hall exploded open. Every head turned. The auctioneer's smile froze. Even Ava, trapped in her spiral of panic, felt the shift in the room, the way the atmosphere changed from predatory to prey in a single heartbeat. A man entered, and the world seemed to contract around him. He stood at least 6 feet tall, his frame all lean muscle and coiled power beneath a suit that probably cost more than the combined wealth in this room. Dark hair swept back from a face carved from brutal elegance, sharp cheekbones, a jaw that looked like it could break stone, and eyes so dark they were almost black. But it wasn't his appearance that made grown men shrink in their seats. It was the aura of absolute, unquestionable authority that preceded him like a tidal wave. 2 men flanked him, clearly bodyguards, clearly lethal, but they were mere shadows. Everything about the stranger demanded attention, commanded submission. He moved down the center aisle with the confidence of someone who'd never been denied anything, never been challenged without consequences so severe they became legend. Dante Rinaldi, someone whispered, the name carrying the weight of myth and terror. Even through her shock, Ava knew that name. Everyone in Italy knew that name, though it was rarely spoken above a whisper. Dante Rinaldi, the ghost of Naples, the merchant of death, the man who controlled criminal enterprises from Sicily to Switzerland. Politicians feared him. Rival families avoided him. Entire organizations had collapsed under the weight of his displeasure, and he was walking straight toward the platform. The auctioneer recovered his composure, though his smile had become brittle. Mr. Rinaldi, what an unexpected pleasure. If you're interested in this lot, you're welcome to... How much? Dante's voice was winter-given sound, cold, sharp, absolute. I'm sorry? How much to end this auction right now? The auctioneer blinked. The current bid is 750,000 euros, but I'm sure if we continue, $100 million. The room went silent. Not the ordinary quiet of people pausing conversation, but the absolute absence of sound that follows statements so shocking they stop hearts mid-beat. Excuse me? The auctioneer's professional mask cracked completely. Dante Rinaldi didn't repeat himself. He simply climbed the steps onto the platform, 3 long strides that brought him face to face with Ava for the first time. Up close, he was even more devastating. Not handsome in any conventional sense, but compelling in the way natural disasters were compelling. Impossible to look away from, impossible to forget. His dark eyes met hers, and Ava felt the impact like a physical touch. There was intelligence in that gaze, calculation, and something else she couldn't identify. He studied her for 3 long seconds, taking in her paint-stained jeans, her oversized cardigan, the terror written across her face. Then he turned back to the auctioneer. $100 million wired to your accounts within the hour. The auction ends now. She comes with me. Are we clear? Mr. Rinaldi, I don't have the authority to... Then get someone who does. Dante's voice never rose above conversational, but the threat in it was unmistakable. You have 60 seconds. The auctioneer's hand shook as he pulled out his phone. Somewhere in the audience, a man cleared his throat. Rinaldi, this is highly irregular. The auction has rules. Dante's bodyguard moved, and the man's protest died instantly. 45 seconds, Dante said. Ava watched this unfold in dreamlike detachment. The auctioneer spoke rapidly into his phone, his face pale. The men in the audience shifted uncomfortably, torn between outrage at the disruption and terror of the man causing it. Nobody moved to challenge him. Nobody dared. Yes, sir. Right away, sir. The auctioneer lowered his phone, and his professional smile had been replaced by something closer to nausea. The owners accept your offer, Mr. Rinaldi. The lot is yours. Excellent. Dante reached into his jacket and produced a phone of his own, typing something quickly. Funds are transferring now. I trust there will be no complications with paperwork? No, sir. No complications. Good. Then Dante turned to Ava, and she finally understood what it meant to be truly seen. His dark eyes held hers, and she felt stripped bare. Every fear, every dream, every secret thought exposed under that unflinching gaze. What's your name? He asked, and his voice was almost gentle. Almost. Ava. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. Ava Bellini. Ava. He tested the name like a sommelier testing wine. Then he reached out and, with surprising care, cut the zip ties binding her wrists. The plastic fell away, leaving red marks on her skin. Come with me. It wasn't a request. It wasn't even really a command. It was simply a statement of what would happen next, as inevitable as gravity. Ava's mind screamed at her to run, to fight, to do anything but follow this dangerous stranger who'd just paid $100 million for ownership of her life. But her body, still trembling with shock and fear, obeyed. She took one step down from the platform, then another. Dante's hand came to rest on the small of her back. Not gripping, not forcing, just guiding. And she felt the heat of his touch through her thin sweater like a brand. They walked through the auction hall together. The men in the audience parted like water before a ship's prow. Nobody spoke. Nobody protested. They simply watched as Dante Rinaldi claimed his purchase and disappeared through the double doors with Ava Bellini at his side. The last thing Ava saw before the doors closed was the auctioneer's face, relief and terror in equal measure, as the man who'd nearly sold her to the highest bidder realized exactly whose attention he'd just attracted. The parking garage beneath the building held dozens of expensive vehicles, but Dante led her to a black Maserati that looked like it cost more than her entire neighborhood. One of his bodyguards opened the rear door. Get in, Dante said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Ava hesitated for 1 heartbeat. 2. Then she climbed into the car because what choice did she have? Where could she run? Who would help her? Dante slid in beside her. The leather seats were cream-colored and impossibly soft. The interior smelled of expensive cologne and something darker, gunmetal and danger. The car pulled out of the garage smoothly, climbing into Monaco's glittering night. Ava pressed herself against the door, putting as much distance between herself and Dante as the confined space allowed. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Every muscle in her body screamed danger, predator, run. Where are you taking me? She managed. Home, Dante said simply, not looking at her. He'd pulled out his phone again and was typing something, his expression carved from stone. I want to go back to Milan. I want to go home. That's not your home anymore. The casual certainty in his voice ignited something in Ava, a spark of anger that burned through the fear and shock. You can't just kidnap me. What you did back there, buying me like I'm some kind of object, that's illegal. It's slavery. I have rights. You had rights. Now Dante did look at her, and the intensity of his gaze stole her breath. The moment your father signed those papers, you became collateral. The moment I paid $100 million, you became mine. That's not an opinion, Ava Bellini. That's a fact. My father had no right. Your father gambled away everything he had and then borrowed from people who don't forgive debt. He offered you a surety, signed legal documents, and collected money based on that promise. When he couldn't pay, his creditors came to collect. That's how this works. That's insane. That's reality. Dante's expression didn't change. You can rage against it all you want. You can cry and scream and plot escape. None of it will change what you are now. And what's that? Mine. The word hung in the air between them, heavy with implications Ava couldn't bear to examine. She turned away, staring out the tinted window as Monaco gave way to the French coast, the Mediterranean stretching dark and endless beneath the stars. They drove for hours. Ava must have dozed at some point because she jerked awake to find dawn breaking over the sea and the car climbing a winding road into the hills. In the growing light, she could make out a structure ahead, a massive estate perched on the cliffs, all pale stone and ancient architecture, surrounded by high walls and clearly modern security. What is this place? She whispered. Your new home, Dante said. The Villa Rinaldi. It's been in my family for 200 years. The gates opened automatically as they approached, and the Maserati pulled into a courtyard that belonged in a magazine about European castles. Fountains, gardens, colonnades, all of it gleaming in the early morning light. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. It was a prison dressed up as paradise. Dante exited the car and circled around to open Ava's door himself, a gesture of courtesy that felt absurd given the circumstances. Come. Ava climbed out on shaking legs. The Mediterranean wind whipped her hair, carrying the salt-sharp scent of the sea. The villa loomed before her, at least 3 stories, with wings stretching out on either side and more windows than she could count. Somewhere in the distance, she heard the crash of waves against rocks. This way. Dante led her through an arched entrance into the villa's interior, and Ava's breath caught despite herself. The entrance hall soared 2 stories high, with a grand staircase that curved upward like something from a Renaissance painting. Marble floors, silk rugs, art that was probably priceless. Everything spoke of wealth so old and deep, it had become its own form of power. A woman appeared, older, gray-haired, wearing a simple black dress and an expression of professional neutrality. Mr. Rinaldi, welcome home. Sophia. Dante didn't slow his stride. Have Maria prepare the West Wing guest suite, and have someone bring up appropriate clothing, everything she'll need. Of course, sir. They climbed the staircase, and Ava numbly followed. Her mind felt disconnected from her body, unable to process the enormity of what was happening. Just yesterday morning, she'd been sitting in a cafe in Milan, worried about her literature essay and whether she could afford new art supplies. Now she was climbing a marble staircase in a Mediterranean fortress, owned by a man who commanded fear like other men commanded waiters. Dante led her down a hallway lined with portraits, stern-faced men and elegant women, generations of Rinaldis staring down at them with painted eyes. He stopped at a set of double doors and pushed them open. The suite beyond was larger than her entire apartment in Milan. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the sea. A massive 4-poster bed dominated one side of the room, draped in silk. Doors led to what appeared to be a bathroom and a walk-in closet. Fresh flowers stood in crystal vases, filling the air with their scent. This is your room, Dante said. You'll have access to most of the villa, though certain areas are restricted. Meals will be provided. If you need anything, ask Sophia or any of the household staff. Ava turned to face him, and the anger she'd felt earlier came rushing back. Am I a prisoner here? Yes. At least he was honest. For how long? That depends on many factors. Such as? Dante studied her for a long moment, his dark eyes revealing nothing. Such as whether you try to run, whether you cause problems, whether you can learn to accept reality instead of fighting it. Accept that you bought me? That you own me? Ava's voice rose. Never. I'll never accept that. Something flickered across Dante's face, too quick to identify. We'll see. Get some rest, Ava Bellini. You've had a difficult night. He turned to leave, and Ava heard herself say, Why? Dante paused in the doorway, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the hallway light. Why what? Why $100 million? Those men at the auction, they were bidding thousands. You paid $100 million. Why? For the first time since she'd met him, Dante Rinaldi smiled. It was a small thing, barely a curve at the corner of his mouth, but it transformed his face from brutal to devastating. Because I could, he said simply. And because the moment I saw you standing on that platform, I knew that no one else was going to touch you. Not now, not ever. Then he was gone, the door closing behind him with a soft click, and Ava was alone in a gilded cage overlooking the Mediterranean, a possession of the most dangerous man in Italy, with no idea what tomorrow would bring. She walked to the windows and pressed her palms against the glass, staring out at the endless sea. Somewhere across those waves lay Milan, her father, her small life with her books and her dreams. All of it might as well have been on another planet. Ava Bellini had disappeared from one world and been forcibly reborn into another, one where powerful men bought and sold human beings, where $100 million was a rounding error, where the rules she'd believed governed civilization turned out to be nothing more than comfortable lies. And the man who'd purchased her, who now owned her, was an enigma wrapped in violence and wrapped in wealth. Dante Rinaldi, the ghost of Naples, the merchant of death, who'd looked at her with those impossibly dark eyes and declared she was his. Ava didn't know what that meant yet. She didn't know what he wanted from her, what he expected, what price she'd ultimately pay for her father's catastrophic mistakes. But as dawn broke fully over the Mediterranean, painting the water in shades of gold and rose, Ava made herself a promise. She might be trapped in this villa. She might be legally owned by a criminal who inspired fear across 3 countries, but her mind was still her own. Her will was still her own. Dante Rinaldi might have bought her body. He would never own her soul. Ava woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the disorienting sensation of silk sheets against her skin. For one blessed moment, she forgot where she was. Then memory crashed back, the auction, the platform, Dante Rinaldi's dark eyes, and that terrible word, mine. She sat up too quickly, her head swimming. Someone had removed her shoes while she slept, though she was still wearing her paint-stained jeans and cardigan. The room looked even more intimidating in daylight. All that pale marble and antique furniture, the massive windows framing an impossibly blue Mediterranean. A soft knock preceded the door opening. The gray-haired woman from last night, Sophia, entered carrying a silver tray. "Good morning, Miss Bellini. I've brought breakfast." "I'm not hungry." "You should eat anyway." Sophia set the tray on a small table near the windows with the kind of firm gentleness that suggested she'd raised children. "Mr. Rinaldi has asked to see you at 10 o'clock. That gives you an hour to prepare." Ava's stomach nodded. "Prepare for what?" He didn't specify. Sophia moved to the closet and opened it, revealing shelves now filled with clothing that definitely hadn't been there last night. "I've taken the liberty of having appropriate items brought up. Everything should fit. Mr. Rinaldi was quite specific about measurements." Heat flooded Ava's face. The idea of Dante studying her body closely enough to estimate her size made her skin crawl. "I don't want his clothes. I want my own things. Your belongings from Milan are being collected and will arrive within the week." Sophia pulled out a simple dress and soft cream linen. "Until then, you'll need to make do. The bathroom is through that door. Towels and toiletries have been provided." Before Ava could protest further, Sophia left, closing the door with a quiet click that sounded horribly final. Ava stared at the breakfast tray. Fresh fruit, pastries that smelled like heaven, coffee in a porcelain cup so delicate it was nearly translucent. Her stomach growled traitorously despite the fear churning in her gut. She hadn't eaten since yesterday morning, and her body didn't care about the circumstances of her captivity. She ate mechanically, tasting nothing, then forced herself into the bathroom. It was larger than her bedroom in Milan, all white marble and gold fixtures. A shower that could fit 4 people, a bathtub deep enough to drown in. She stood under water hot enough to scald, scrubbing at her skin as if she could wash away the memory of strange hands dragging her onto that auction platform. When she finally emerged, wrapped in a towel softer than clouds, she found Sophia had returned and laid out not just the cream dress, but undergarments, stockings, even shoes that looked handmade. Everything in exactly her size. Ava wanted to refuse to stay in her paint-stained jeans as an act of defiance, but the jeans smelled like fear and the chemical sweetness of whatever they'd used to knock her unconscious. With shaking hands, she dressed in the clothes Dante Rinaldi had provided, hating how well they fit, hating how the cream linen made her look almost elegant despite her red-rimmed eyes. A clock on the mantel showed 9:58. Ava's heart hammered as she paced the room, counting seconds. At precisely 10 o'clock, another knock sounded. This time, it was one of Dante's bodyguards, the stone-faced man who'd flanked him at the auction. "Mr. Rinaldi is waiting. Come with me." Ava followed him through hallways that seemed designed to disorient. The villa was a labyrinth of marble corridors, grand staircases, rooms glimpsed through half-open doors. Servants moved through the space like ghosts, their eyes sliding away from her as she passed. Nobody spoke. Nobody acknowledged her existence beyond a subtle shifting to clear her path. The bodyguard stopped at a set of carved wooden doors and knocked twice. A voice from within, Dante's voice, unmistakable, even muffled, said something in Italian too quick for Ava to follow. The doors opened onto a study that looked like it belonged in a museum. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined 3 walls, packed with leather-bound volumes in multiple languages. An enormous desk dominated the space, its surface covered with papers, multiple phones, and a laptop displaying what looked like financial charts. Behind the desk, windows overlooked the cliffs and the sea beyond. Dante stood at those windows, his back to her, wearing dark slacks and a white shirt, with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. Even in this casual state, he radiated authority. His shoulders were broader than she'd realized, his posture that of a man who'd never doubted his right to rule. "Sit," he said without turning. There were 2 chairs facing the desk. Ava remained standing. I'd rather not spend the morning arguing about furniture." Now Dante turned, and Ava's breath caught despite herself. In the harsh light of day, he was somehow even more compelling than he'd been in the dim auction hall. His face was all sharp angles and controlled power, those dark eyes missing nothing. A thin scar traced his left eyebrow, the only imperfection in an otherwise brutally perfect face. "Sit, Ava, please." The please surprised her enough that she obeyed, perching on the edge of the leather chair as if ready to bolt. Dante crossed to his desk and sat, lacing his fingers together as he studied her with the intensity of a scientist examining a particularly interesting specimen. "How did you sleep?" he asked. The mundane question from this dangerous man was so absurd that Ava almost laughed. "How do you think I slept? I was kidnapped, auctioned like livestock, and purchased by a stranger. I slept terribly." "Fair enough." Dante pulled a file folder from a drawer and opened it. "I've been reviewing your background. Literature student at the Università degli Studi di Milano. 22 years old. Mother deceased when you were 8. Father ran a failing import business. You work part-time at Libreria Huepli, spend your free time sketching in Parco Sempione, and your professors describe you as brilliant but unfocused." He looked up. "That's quite a lot of potential being wasted on someone who was invisible to the world." Ava's hands clenched in her lap. "You had me investigated?" "Of course. I don't spend $100 million on impulse." Dante closed the folder. "Your father's debts were substantial, but they didn't warrant that kind of expenditure. Do you know why I paid so much for you?" "You said it was because you could." "That was part of it." Dante leaned back in his chair, never breaking eye contact. "The complete answer is more complicated. When I walked into that auction hall and saw you on that platform, terrified, furious, trying so hard to be brave, I saw something those other men missed. They saw a frightened girl they could break and use. I saw potential they were too stupid to recognize." "Potential for what?" "That remains to be seen." Dante stood and moved to a small bar cart near the bookshelves, pouring amber liquid into a crystal glass. He didn't offer her any. "Here's how this is going to work, Ava Bellini. You belong to me now, legally, financially, in every way that matters. You will live in this villa. You will be provided for. In exchange, you will follow certain rules. And if I refuse, then life becomes considerably more difficult for both of us." Dante took a sip of his drink. I'm not a patient man, Ava, and I don't tolerate disobedience. But I'm also not a monster. Follow the rules, and you'll find your cage is reasonably comfortable. What rules? The words tasted like ash. You don't leave the villa grounds without permission and escort. You don't contact anyone from your previous life. No friends, no former classmates, and especially not your father. You attend meals when summoned. You dress appropriately. And you remember, always, exactly what you are. A slave. A possession, Dante corrected. There's a difference. Not to me. Something flickered in Dante's expression, too quick to identify. He drained his glass and set it down with a sharp click. You'll have access to the library, the gardens, the pool, and most of the common areas. The east wing is restricted, my private quarters and offices. The security rooms are off limits. The garage and main gates are monitored at all times, so don't entertain fantasies of stealing a car. You've thought of everything. I always do. Dante returned to his desk and pulled out a small velvet box. He opened it to reveal a delicate bracelet, gold filigree so fine it looked like lace, set with small diamonds that caught the light. Give me your wrist. Ava pulled back. No. It's not a request. I don't want your jewelry. It's not jewelry. Dante's voice hardened. It's a tracking device. Sophisticated, expensive, and completely unremovable without the proper tools. Give me your wrist, or I'll have Marco and Alessandro hold you down while I put it on. Your choice. The casual threat, delivered in that same calm tone he might use to discuss the weather, sent ice through Ava's veins. She thought about fighting, about making him follow through with his threat. But what would be the point? He'd already proven he had the power, the resources, and the complete absence of conscience to do exactly what he wanted. Slowly, hating herself for the surrender, she extended her left wrist. Dante's fingers were surprisingly gentle as he fastened the bracelet. His skin was warm against hers, and she caught the scent of his cologne, something dark and expensive that probably cost more than her monthly rent used to. The bracelet clicked shut with a sound like a prison door closing. There, Dante released her wrist. It monitors your location at all times. If you somehow manage to leave the villa grounds, I'll know within seconds. If you try to remove it, I'll know. If you go somewhere you're not supposed to, I'll know. Do you understand? Ava stared at the golden shackle on her wrist. The diamonds glittered mockingly. Perfectly. Good. Now for the more pleasant aspects of your new life. Dante pulled out another folder. I understand you have an interest in art. There's a studio in the south wing, well lit, fully equipped. You're welcome to use it whenever you like. The statement was so unexpected that Ava looked up sharply. What? A studio. For painting, sketching, whatever you do. Dante's expression remained neutral. I employ several artists on retainer for various projects. I've had them stock it with professional-grade materials. Why would you do that? Because broken things are useless, and bored things cause problems. You'll be happier with a creative outlet, which means less trouble for me. Dante pushed a paper across the desk. This is a list of staff members you're likely to encounter. Sophia manages the household. Chef Laurent handles meals. Marco and Alessandro are my primary security, but there are others. Memorize the names. Ava didn't touch the paper. Is that all? For now. Dante stood, signaling the meeting was over. Lunch is served at 1. You'll join me. I'd rather eat alone. I'd rather you learn that what you want stopped mattering the moment your father traded you for poker chips. Dante's voice was soft, but the steel beneath it was unmistakable. 1 o'clock, Ava. The dining room. Don't be late. He gestured to the door, and the bodyguard who'd brought her, Marco presumably, materialized to escort her out. Ava stood on shaking legs, her new bracelet heavy as an anchor around her wrist. Oh, and Ava? Dante's voice stopped her at the threshold. The dress looks lovely on you. Wear the blue one tonight for dinner. I think you'll find it suits you even better. The presumption in his tone, the casual assumption that she'd obey, that she'd wear whatever he wanted her to wear like some kind of doll, made fury bloom hot in her chest. But before she could form a cutting response, Marco was guiding her into the hallway, and the study doors were closing behind them. The morning dissolved into forced exploration. Ava wandered the villa's permitted areas, cataloging escape routes that didn't exist, noting security cameras in every corridor, counting guards stationed at strategic points. The villa was a fortress disguised as a palace, beautiful, luxurious, and completely inescapable. The library alone could have swallowed her entire apartment building. Thousands of books in Italian, French, English, even some in languages whose alphabets she didn't recognize. First editions, rare volumes, manuscripts behind glass. Under other circumstances, Ava could have lost herself here for months. Instead, she felt like a butterfly pinned to a board, wings still beating uselessly. The gardens were equally magnificent, terraced into the hillside, bursting with flowers that filled the air with competing perfumes. Stone paths wound between fountains and sculptures. At the garden's edge, a low wall overlooked the cliffs and the Mediterranean stretching to the horizon. Ava approached it carefully, half expecting alarms or guards to materialize. Instead, she found only silence and the crash of waves far below. For one wild moment, she considered it. The drop was substantial, maybe 80 feet to the rocks. Fatal, certainly, but also final. A permanent escape from the gilded cage Dante Rinaldi had locked her in. I wouldn't if I were you. Ava spun. A young woman stood nearby, maybe 25, with dark hair pulled into a severe bun and the kind of elegant beauty that came from expensive maintenance. She wore a tailored suit and an expression of mild curiosity. Wouldn't what? Ava demanded. Jump. The fall would probably kill you, but if it didn't, the currents would pull you out to sea. The woman moved closer, her heels clicking on the stone path. Besides, Dante would be very unhappy. He just paid a fortune for you. Who are you? Isabella Romano. I handle certain business matters for Dante. Isabella's smile was sharp as a knife. I was curious about the girl he paid $100 million for. I admit, I don't quite see the appeal. The casual cruelty in her tone made Ava's chin lift. Then maybe your opinion wasn't requested. Oh, I like her, Isabella laughed, but there was no warmth in it. She has claws after all. Listen, girl, my name is Ava. Listen, Ava, whatever fantasies you're entertaining about escaping or appealing to Dante's better nature, let me save you some time. Dante Rinaldi doesn't have a better nature. He has interests, objectives, and very strict definitions of ownership. You're the latter now. The sooner you accept that, the easier your life will be. And you? Ava's voice shook with barely controlled rage. Are you his property too, or do you just help him acquire new ones? Isabella's smile vanished. For a moment, something dangerous flashed in her eyes. Then she smoothed her expression back to professional neutrality. I'm his attorney and business partner. I chose to be here. You didn't. That's the only difference that matters. She turned and walked away, her heels sharp against the stone, leaving Ava alone with the sea wind and the persistent fantasy of jumping. But she didn't jump, because beneath the fear and fury and violation, some stubborn part of Ava refused to give Dante Rinaldi the satisfaction. He'd bought her body, claimed ownership of her future, stripped away her freedom. He wouldn't get her surrender too. At precisely 1 o'clock, Ava found her way to the dining room. It was another study in calculated opulence, a table long enough to seat 20 beneath a chandelier that probably cost more than her father's business had ever earned. Dante sat at the head, reading something on his phone, a glass of red wine at his elbow. He looked up as she entered. Punctual. Good. A servant pulled out a chair, not beside Dante, but near enough that conversation would be unavoidable. Ava sat stiffly as plates were set before them, some kind of fish in a delicate sauce, vegetables arranged like art, bread that smelled like it had been baked minutes ago. Eat, Dante said. And there was that tone again. Not quite command, not quite request, but absolute certainty that he'd be obeyed. Ava picked up her fork with hands that trembled slightly. The food was incredible, which somehow made everything worse. She was being fed like a princess while wearing a tracking bracelet like a criminal. Tell me about your writing, Dante said suddenly. Ava's fork paused halfway to her mouth. What? Your writing. Your file said you want to be a novelist. What do you write about? The question was so unexpected, so weirdly normal, that Ava didn't know how to respond. I don't know. Different things. Stories about people who feel invisible, who want more than the lives they're stuck in. Ironic. What is? You spent your life writing about people trapped in circumstances they didn't choose, feeling invisible to the world. Dante's dark eyes held hers. Now you're living it. The observation cut too close. Ava set down her fork. Is that what this is? Some kind of twisted experiment? You wanted to see what happens when you cage a writer? No. Dante took a sip of wine. I wanted to own something beautiful that no one else had seen the value of. The fact that you're a writer is secondary. I'm not a thing to be owned. And yet, here we are. Dante gestured at the opulent room around them. You can fight the reality all you want, Ava. You can hate me, plot against me, dream about escape. None of it changes what you are now. And what's that? Mine to protect. Mine to provide for. Mine to keep safe from a world that was quite happy to auction you to men who would have broken you in a week. Dante's expression remained neutral, but something in his voice shifted. You think I'm the villain in your story. Perhaps I am, but I'm the villain who paid a fortune to keep you out of worse hands. You're still a kidnapper. Yes. No denial, no justification, just flat acknowledgement. I am. The rest of the meal passed in tense silence. Ava forced herself to eat, refused to look at Dante, and counted the minutes until she could escape back to her room. When the plates were finally cleared, she stood without asking permission. Tonight is a formal dinner, Dante said as she turned to leave. 7 o'clock. Wear the blue dress I mentioned. We'll have guests. Ava's stomach dropped. What guests? Business associates. They'll want to meet you. No? Ava, no. I won't be paraded around like some kind of trophy. I won't smile and pretend while your criminal friends examine your latest acquisition. Dante stood, and the movement was liquid and dangerous. He crossed the distance between them in 3 strides, and suddenly he was far too close, his presence overwhelming. Ava's back hit the wall as he braced one hand beside her head, not touching her, but creating a cage of his body and arm. Let me be very clear, he said, his voice soft and terrifying. You will attend dinner tonight. You will wear the blue dress. You will be polite and pleasant to my guests. And you will remember, every second, that the only reason you're not still on that auction block being sold to the highest bidder is because I decided you were worth more. I didn't ask to be saved. No one does. But here we are. Dante's free hand came up and Ava flinched, but he only tucked a strand of her hair behind her ear with surprising gentleness. The blue dress, Ava. 7 o'clock. Don't make me come find you. Then he was gone, striding out of the dining room and leaving Ava pressed against the wall, her heart racing, her skin burning where his fingers had brushed her face. She fled to her room and spent the afternoon alternating between fury and despair. The blue dress hung in her closet, floor-length silk the color of midnight, cut to fit her body like it had been made specifically for her measurements, which it probably had been. Dante Rinaldi, who controlled criminal empires and inspired fear across 3 countries, had apparently found time to have a dress custom-made for his newest possession. Ava tried to refuse. She really did. She sat in her room until 6:45, wearing the cream dress from this morning, determined to defy him. But at 6:50, imagining Dante making good on his threat to come find her, imagining being dragged to dinner in front of his guests, she surrendered. The blue dress fit perfectly, of course. The silk whispered against her skin like water. A pair of delicate heels, also in her exact size, sat beside it. Ava dressed mechanically, hating how beautiful she looked in the mirror, hating the golden bracelet that marked her as property, hating everything about this nightmare she couldn't wake from. At precisely 7 o'clock, Sophia knocked to escort her downstairs. The formal dining room was even more intimidating than the one from lunch, all crystal and candlelight, the table set for 12. Half the places were already occupied by men in expensive suits, their conversation stopping as Ava entered. Their gazes crawled over her like insects, assessing, calculating, pricing. Dante stood at the head of the table, and his expression shifted when he saw her. Something dark and possessive flickered across his face, there and gone too quickly to interpret. Gentlemen, he said, his voice cutting through the sudden silence, allow me to introduce Ava Bellini. The evening that followed was one of the longest of Ava's life. She sat beside Dante, silent except when directly addressed, while powerful men discussed business in careful euphemisms. Money laundering disguised as investment strategies, territory disputes framed as market expansion, violence wrapped in the language of problem solving. And through it all, Dante's hand occasionally came to rest on the back of her chair, not touching her, but establishing ownership. This is mine, the gesture said. Look, but don't touch. The men understood. Their gazes slid over her with wary respect now, because she belonged to Dante Rinaldi, and crossing him meant consequences too severe to contemplate. After the dessert plates were cleared, Dante stood. "Gentlemen, if you'll excuse us, Ava needs rest." No one argued. No one even seemed surprised. Dante offered his arm, and Ava had no choice but to take it, letting him guide her from the room. His hand was warm through the thin silk of her dress. He walked her back to her suite in silence. At her door, he paused, studying her with those impossibly dark eyes. "You did well tonight," he said finally. "I had no choice." "No, you didn't." Dante reached out and adjusted the delicate chain of her necklace. Another piece of jewelry that had appeared with the dress, diamonds, and sapphires worth a fortune. "But you could have made it much more difficult. You chose not to. That shows intelligence. It shows self-preservation. Sometimes those are the same thing." Dante's hand lingered near her throat for a moment too long, his thumb brushing the rapid pulse at her neck. Then he stepped back. "Sleep well, Ava Bellini. Tomorrow I'll show you the studio I mentioned. I think you'll find it to your liking." He disappeared down the hallway, leaving Ava alone with her racing heart and the phantom warmth of his touch against her skin. She retreated into her suite, locked the door, though she knew it would do no good against Dante's authority, and finally allowed herself to break. Tears came hard and fast, soaking the expensive silk pillowcases as the enormity of her situation crashed over her again. She was trapped, owned, a possession kept in luxury, but a possession nonetheless. And the worst part, the absolute worst part, was the tiny traitorous voice in the back of her mind that whispered about the way Dante had looked at her in that blue dress, about his unexpected gentleness mixed with all that dangerous power, about how he'd paid $100 million and called it worth every penny. Ava cried herself to sleep, hating Dante Rinaldi, hating her father for his weakness, hating the world that had allowed her to be bought and sold like merchandise. But somewhere in the dark hours before dawn, she dreamed of dark eyes and gentle hands, of a man who was both captor and savior, and woke with a start, terrified of what those dreams might mean. 3 weeks passed in a strange rhythm of captivity and routine. Ava woke each morning to Mediterranean sunlight streaming through her windows, ate meals that were culinary masterpieces, and spent her afternoons in the studio Dante had promised, a sun-drenched room in the south wing with north-facing windows, professional easels, and art supplies that would have cost her 5 years' salary at the bookstore. She painted because the alternative was madness. She painted the sea, the cliffs, the gardens she was allowed to walk through under watchful eyes. She painted from memory, the cafes of Milan, the university library, her small apartment that felt like another lifetime. And sometimes, when she wasn't paying attention to what her hands were doing, she painted him. Dante's face emerging from shadow and light, those dark eyes that seemed to see through every defense she tried to construct. She always destroyed those paintings before anyone could see them. Their interactions had settled into an uneasy pattern. Breakfast alone in her room, lunch sometimes with Dante, sometimes without, depending on his schedule, dinner together more often than not, occasionally with guests, but usually just the two of them at opposite ends of that ridiculous table. He asked her about her painting, her reading, her thoughts on books from his library. She gave short answers, never forgot the golden bracelet on her wrist, never let herself believe these civilized conversations made them anything other than captor and captive. But the dreams continued. Dreams where Dante's hands weren't just gentle but tender, where his dark eyes held something other than possession. Ava woke from these dreams furious with herself, scrubbing at her skin as if she could wash away the phantom sensations. On a Thursday morning that started like all the others, Sophia knocked earlier than usual. "Mr. Rinaldi requests your presence in his study immediately." Something in the woman's tone made Ava's stomach knot. "Why? What's happened?" "He didn't say, but you should hurry." Ava dressed quickly in one of the simple dresses from her now extensive wardrobe. She'd stopped fighting that battle after the first week, and followed Sophia through the villa's corridors. The study doors stood open. Dante sat behind his desk, his expression carved from granite, a laptop open before him showing what looked like security footage. "Close the door," he said without preamble. Ava obeyed, her pulse quickening. "What's wrong?" "Sit down." "Dante, you're scaring me." "Sit down." The command in his voice was absolute. Ava sank into one of the chairs, her hands gripping the armrests. Dante turned the laptop so she could see the screen. The footage showed the villa's front gates from multiple angles, time-stamped from last night around 2 in the morning. A figure in dark clothing had approached the gates, spent several minutes examining the security system, then disappeared when lights activated. "Do you recognize this person?" Dante asked. Ava leaned closer, studying the grainy image. The figure was too distant, too shadowed. "No, should I?" "Look again. Third camera angle when the motion sensors trigger." Dante clicked to a different view, and this time the figure's face caught the light for just a moment. Ava's breath stopped. The face was younger, unfamiliar in most ways, but the nose, the jawline, the way he moved. "That's impossible," she whispered. "Your father has been attempting to access the villa for 3 days now." Dante's voice was ice. "My security has intercepted him twice. Last night he made it as far as the gates before motion sensors drove him back." Marco Bellini, here, trying to reach her. Ava's mind reeled with the implications. "I don't understand. How would he even know where I am?" "That's an excellent question." Dante stood and circled the desk, perching on its edge directly in front of her. "One I've been asking myself. The auction was conducted through anonymous channels. The sale finalized through untraceable accounts. The only people who know you're here are my most trusted associates." He paused, his dark eyes boring into hers. "Unless someone told him." The accusation hung in the air between them. Ava shot to her feet. "You think I contacted him? With what, Dante? You monitor every phone in this villa. You track my every movement. When exactly would I have told my father where to find me?" "People find ways." "Not people who are prisoners." The word exploded out of her, raw and furious. "You've made very sure I can't communicate with anyone from my old life. So either your security isn't as good as you think, or someone in your organization leaked the information. But it wasn't me." Dante studied her for a long moment, and Ava couldn't read his expression. Then he stood, moving past her to stare out the windows at the cliffs. "I believe you." The simple statement caught her off guard. "You do?" "Yes. Which means I have a traitor somewhere in my operation, and that's a problem I'll deal with separately." Dante turned back to face her. "But your father's presence here creates a more immediate complication." "What kind of complication?" "The kind where desperate men do stupid things and people get killed." Dante's tone was matter-of-fact, discussing violence the way someone else might discuss the weather. "Your father is attempting to reach you. He's being reckless, leaving traces, drawing attention. If he keeps this up, one of two things will happen. Either my security will be forced to eliminate him as a threat, or worse, my enemies will notice the pattern and realize you matter to me." Ava's throat went dry. "I don't matter to you. I'm just property you bought." "Do you really believe that?" Dante moved closer, and Ava found herself backing up until she hit the wall. He didn't touch her, but his presence was overwhelming. "After 3 weeks of watching me ensure you have everything you could possibly need? After seeing me turn away business associates who wanted to borrow you? After all those dinners where I could have ignored you completely but instead asked about your day, your painting, your thoughts?" His hand came up, bracing against the wall beside her head. "If you were just property, Ava, I would have locked you in a room and forgotten about you. Instead, I think about you every hour of every day. I wonder what you're painting, whether you're happy. If you hate me a little less than you did yesterday." Ava's heart hammered against her ribs. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because your father's interference means I have to make a choice." Dante's other hand came up, caging her against the wall without touching her. "I can have him killed quietly, end the problem permanently. Or I can let you see him, let you tell him to stop, save his miserable life. What do you want me to do?" The question was impossible. See her father, the man who'd sold her, who traded her life for his debts, and beg him to save himself? Or let Dante execute him and carry that guilt forever? "I want you to let me go," Ava whispered. "I want you to admit this whole situation is insane and release me." "That's not one of the options." "Then what do you want from me, Dante?" Her voice cracked. "You bought me. You keep me here like some kind of bird in a cage. You give me everything except freedom, and now you're asking me to choose whether my father lives or dies. What do you want?" "I want you to stop looking at me like I'm a monster." The admission came out raw, unguarded, and Dante seemed as surprised by it as Ava was. He pushed away from the wall, putting distance between them. "I want you to understand that I saved you from a fate worse than this. I want—" He stopped, his jaw clenching. "It doesn't matter what I want. The question is what you want. Do you want to see your father or not? Ava wrapped her arms around herself, trying to hold together. If I see him, if I tell him to stop, you'll let him live. Yes. And if I refuse, then he dies tonight, and you never have to think about him again. The casual certainty in Dante's voice, the absolute lack of moral conflict about executing someone, should have horrified her, and it did. But it also reinforced what she'd been trying to ignore for 3 weeks. Dante Rinaldi was exactly who everyone said he was: dangerous, ruthless, a man who solved problems with violence and never lost sleep over the bodies. I'll see him, Ava said quietly. I'll tell him to stop. Something shifted in Dante's expression, relief maybe, or something more complicated. Good, I'll arrange it for tonight. Neutral location, heavy security. You'll have 15 minutes. 15 minutes to save his life. 15 minutes to say whatever you need to say. Dante returned to his desk, the moment of vulnerability sealed away behind his usual mask of control. Marco will escort you. Don't try anything stupid, Ava. My patience has limits. I'm well aware. Ava moved toward the door, then paused. Dante? Why give me this choice at all? You could have just killed him without telling me. Dante didn't look up from his laptop. Because despite what you think of me, I'm not entirely without conscience. And because I need you to understand something, I will protect you from anyone and anything, including your own family, even if it means becoming more of a monster in your eyes. The words followed Ava back to her room, where she spent the rest of the day alternating between dread and a strange, unwelcome flutter in her chest that she refused to examine too closely. Night fell over the Mediterranean in shades of purple and gold. At 8 o'clock, Marco appeared at her door. It's time. They took one of the villa's armored SUVs, because of course Dante had armored vehicles, driving down winding coastal roads to a small cafe in a village Ava didn't recognize. The place was closed, its windows dark, but lights glowed in the back room. Marco led her inside, his hand resting casually on the weapon at his hip. Her father sat at a small table, looking like he'd aged 20 years in 3 weeks. His clothes were rumpled, his face unshaven, his eyes red-rimmed and desperate. When he saw Ava, he surged to his feet. Ava! Oh, thank heaven, I've been trying to reach you. Sit down, Mr. Bellini. Marco's voice was flat. You have 15 minutes. Use them wisely. Marco withdrew to the doorway, giving them the illusion of privacy while clearly monitoring every word. Ava sank into the chair across from her father, and for a long moment they just stared at each other. You look well, Marco finally said, and there was wonder in his voice. I was so afraid. When they took you, I thought... You thought what, Papa? That the criminals you sold me to might hurt me? Ava's voice was cold. How considerate of you to worry. I didn't have a choice. You had choices. You chose to gamble. You chose to borrow from criminals. You chose to use me as collateral. Those were all choices. Marco's face crumpled. I know, and I'm so sorry, Piccola. I've been trying to fix this, trying to find a way to get you back. There is no getting me back. Ava's hands clenched in her lap. I was auctioned, Papa, sold to the highest bidder. The only reason I'm not in some nightmare scenario is because Dante Rinaldi paid more than anyone else was willing to. Rinaldi, her father spat the name. That monster bought you. That monster is the reason I'm alive and unharmed. That monster is the only thing standing between me and men who would have destroyed me in days. Ava leaned forward. And that monster is about to kill you if you don't stop trying to reach me. The blood drained from Marco's face. What? His security has caught you 3 times. You're drawing attention, leaving traces, being reckless. Dante gave me a choice. I could see you and convince you to stop, or he'd eliminate you as a threat. So here I am, Papa, begging you to save yourself by leaving me alone. I can't do that. You're my daughter. I was your daughter when you signed the papers that made me collateral. I was your daughter when you let them drag me out of our apartment. I was your daughter when you stood there and watched them take me. Ava's voice broke despite her best efforts. But I'm not your daughter anymore. I'm Dante Rinaldi's property. That's what you made me. Tears streamed down Marco's weathered face. Let me make this right. I can get money, find a way to buy you back. With what? You couldn't come up with 3 million euros before. Dante paid $100 million. Where are you going to get that kind of money? I'll find a way. I'll work. I'll borrow it. No. Ava's voice hardened. You'll stop. You'll go back to Milan, you'll rebuild what's left of your life, and you'll forget about me. That's how you make this right. That's how you save yourself. Ava, please. Do you know what he's given me, Papa? The words spilled out, raw and confused. A room bigger than our apartment. Art supplies I could never afford. Books, food, safety. He asks about my day. He listens when I talk. He protects me from men who would hurt me. She stopped, horrified by her own words. I hate that I'm owned. I hate the bracelet on my wrist that tracks my every move. I hate that I can't leave. But I'm not being abused. I'm not being starved or beaten or destroyed, and that's more than I would have gotten anywhere else. Marco reached across the table, grabbing her hands. You're defending him. You're defending the man who bought you like a slave. I'm defending reality. This is my life now, and you need to accept that. More importantly, you need to disappear before Dante decides you're too much of a liability. Ava pulled her hands back. I'm serious, Papa. If you love me, if you ever loved me, you'll stop this. Go home. Stay away. Let me survive this. Time's up. Marco's voice from the doorway was implacable. Ava stood, and her father grabbed her arm desperately. I'll find a way. I swear to you, I'll find a way to fix this. The only thing you need to fix is yourself. Ava pulled free. Goodbye, Papa. She walked out of the cafe without looking back, even as her father called her name, even as his sobs followed her into the night. Marco guided her to the SUV with professional efficiency, and they drove back to the villa in silence. Ava expected to be returned to her room, but Marco led her instead to Dante's study. He sat at his desk, working on something, but looked up when she entered. How did it go? He asked. I told him to stop, to go back to Milan, and forget about me. Ava's voice was hollow. Whether he'll listen is another question. He'll listen. Dante's certainty was absolute. My people will make sure of it. He'll be escorted to the Milan train station tonight and monitored for the next month. If he makes any attempt to contact you again, we'll take more permanent measures. Thank you. The words felt strange on Ava's tongue, thanking her captor for sparing her father's life. Dante stood and crossed to the bar cart, pouring 2 glasses of amber liquid. He offered her one. You look like you need this. Ava took the glass because refusing seemed pointless. The liquor burned going down, but the warmth that followed was welcome. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why did you really let me see him? You could have just killed him, like you said. I never would have known. Dante took a sip of his own drink, considering. Because you would have sensed it eventually. You're perceptive, Ava. You would have noticed his absence, asked questions, and when you figured out the truth, you would have hated me even more than you already do. He paused. And because despite what you think, I don't enjoy causing you pain. Just controlling my life. Yes. No apology, no justification. Just that. They stood in silence, drinking expensive liquor in a study filled with stolen moments and unspoken tensions. Finally, Ava set down her glass. I should go. Wait. Dante moved closer, and Ava's breath caught. There's something I want to show you. He led her out of the study, through corridors she'd walked 100 times, then down a staircase she'd never noticed before. They descended into what appeared to be a wine cellar, temperature-controlled, lined with bottles worth fortunes. But Dante kept walking, to a door at the far end that required both a keycard and a fingerprint to open. Beyond was a room Ava had never seen. Unlike the rest of the villa's opulent decoration, this space was simple, comfortable furniture, soft lighting, and walls covered floor to ceiling with photographs. Ava stepped closer, her heart beginning to pound. The photographs were surveillance shots mostly, grainy images of people in various locations. But as she studied them, a pattern emerged. Every single photograph showed the same thing, the women from the auction. What is this? She whispered. Insurance, Dante said quietly. After I bought you, I bought them too. All of them. Every woman who was at that auction. Ava spun to face him. What? I tracked down who purchased them, made offers they couldn't refuse, and relocated all of them to safe locations across Europe. New identities, financial security, protection from anyone who might come looking. Dante gestured at the photographs. That one, he pointed to a redhead laughing in a cafe, is studying medicine in Geneva now. That one runs a bookshop in Prague. That one is raising her daughter in Barcelona. completely safe from the father who sold her. Ava's mind reeled. Why would you do that? Because the auction was a symptom of a larger disease. Because those women deserved better than being sold to the highest bidder. Because I have the resources to fix some of the world's uglier problems, and I choose to use them. Dante moved to stand beside her, studying the photographs. And because I needed you to understand something. I'm not a good man, Ava. I've done terrible things to build this empire. But I'm not the monster you think I am either. You still bought me. Yes, I did. Dante turned to face her fully. But I bought you to save you, not to destroy you. The difference matters. Does it? Ava's voice shook. I'm still here against my will. I'm still wearing a tracking bracelet. I'm still a possession. For now. Dante's hand came up, and this time when he touched her face, Ava didn't pull away. His thumb traced her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. But possession isn't the same as slavery. And ownership isn't the same as cruelty. I own this villa, Ava, but I don't love it. I own companies and properties and resources, and I feel nothing for them. And me? The question hung between them, charged and dangerous. Dante's dark eyes held hers, and Ava saw something in them she'd been trying to deny for weeks. Hunger, yes, and possession, but also something warmer, something terrifying in its implications. You, he said softly, are rapidly becoming the thing I value most in this world, which is either the best or worst thing that could happen to both of us. Before Ava could respond, before she could process what that confession meant, Dante's phone buzzed. He stepped back, checking it, and his expression hardened instantly. What is it? Ava asked. We need to go, now. Dante grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the door. His entire demeanor had shifted from intimate to lethal in a heartbeat. Marco. The bodyguard appeared as if summoned by thought. Sir? Full lockdown. All protocols. Get her to the safe room. What's happening? Ava's voice climbed. Dante, what's wrong? The Calabrese family knows you're here. Dante's voice was ice and fury. They're coming for you, tonight. Before Ava could ask who the Calabrese family was or why they'd want her, alarms began screaming throughout the villa, and her world exploded into chaos. The villa transformed in seconds. Steel shutters slammed down over windows with mechanical precision, doors sealed with heavy clicks. Somewhere in the distance, Ava heard the unmistakable sound of vehicles approaching at high speed. Marco had her arm in an iron grip, pulling her toward a section of wall that swung open to reveal a hidden staircase. Wait! Ava twisted toward Dante, who was already barking orders into his phone in rapid Italian. What about you? I'll be fine. Go with Marco. Dante's eyes met hers for one charged moment. Do exactly what he says, Ava. Don't argue. Don't hesitate. Understood? But now! The command cracked through the air like a whip. Marco hauled her into the staircase, and the wall sealed behind them with a sound like a tomb closing. They descended into darkness, broken only by emergency lighting strips along the floor. Ava's heels, the delicate ones she'd worn to meet her father, made running impossible. She kicked them off, her bare feet slapping against cold stone as Marco pulled her deeper into the villa's hidden infrastructure. Where are we going? She gasped. Safe room. Reinforced steel, independent power and communications, stocked for a siege. Marco's voice was professionally calm, as if discussing the weather rather than an imminent attack. You'll be secure there until Mr. Rinaldi neutralizes the threat. They reached the bottom of the stairs and emerged into a corridor that looked like something from a military installation. Concrete walls, heavy doors, more emergency lighting. Marco led her to the last door, punched in a code that made locks disengage with heavy thuds, and pushed her inside. The safe room was larger than Ava expected, maybe 20 feet square, with monitors covering one wall showing security feeds from throughout the villa, comfortable furniture, a small kitchen area, what looked like a bathroom door in the corner, and weapons. So many weapons, mounted on racks along one wall with the casual display of someone's art collection. Stay here. Marco moved to the monitors, his fingers flying across controls. Don't open this door for anyone except Mr. Rinaldi or myself. Not Sofia, not Alessandro, not anyone, clear? Marco, what's happening? Who are the Calabrese family? Rivals. They've been trying to move into Mr. Rinaldi's territories for 2 years. If they know about you, if they know you matter to him. Marco's jaw tightened. They'll use you as leverage, Or worse, they'll kill you just to hurt him. The casual discussion of her murder made Ava's knees weak. She sank onto the leather couch, her mind racing. How did they find out? That's a question Mr. Rinaldi will be asking very thoroughly once this is over. Marco's hand went to his earpiece. Copy that. On my way. He turned to Ava. I have to go. The room is yours until someone comes for you. Remember, don't open the door. Wait, you're leaving me here alone? You're safer here than anywhere else in the world right now. Marco was already at the door. Trust Mr. Rinaldi, Miss Bellini. He'll protect you. Then he was gone, the door sealing behind him with mechanical finality. Ava was alone in an underground bunker while above her, violence was about to erupt. She moved to the monitors, watching security feeds with mounting dread. The villa's grounds were lit up like daylight now. Floodlights, spotlights, every security measure activated. She could see Dante's men taking positions throughout the property, weapons drawn, moving with practiced efficiency. And there, at the main gates, vehicles were pulling up. Expensive cars, dark SUVs, men emerging with the confidence of people who expected to win. Ava found Dante on one of the monitors, standing in the villa's entrance hall with Alessandro and 3 other men, all armed, all radiating lethal intent. He changed into dark clothing, tactical gear that made him look even more dangerous than usual. As she watched, he checked his weapon with the casual familiarity of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. The intercom beside the monitors crackled to life, making Ava jump. A voice, refined, cultured, dripping with false politeness, echoed through the safe room. Dante Rinaldi, always a pleasure, though I admit, I expected a warmer welcome. Ava frantically searched the monitors, trying to find the source. There, at the main gates, a man stood flanked by at least a dozen armed guards. He was older than Dante, maybe 60, with silver hair and a face that would have been handsome if not for the cruelty in his eyes. Dante's voice came through the intercom, cold as death. You have 10 seconds to leave my property before my men open fire, Salvatore. Now, is that any way to greet an old friend? I've come all this way just to talk. Talk, on my property, with 12 armed men. How considerate. Dante's hand moved in a subtle signal, and Ava saw his guards shifting positions on the monitors. 9 seconds. I want to see her, Salvatore said. This girl you paid a fortune for, the one you've been keeping locked away like a precious jewel. I want to know what makes her worth $100 million. Ava's blood turned to ice. The monitors showed Dante's expression hardening into something terrifying. 7 seconds. Come now, Dante. We both know how this works. You have something I want. I have resources you need. We can make an arrangement. 5 seconds. She's just a girl. One insignificant girl against the territories I'm offering. Think about it. Joint control of the northern routes, shared operations in Switzerland, a partnership that benefits both our families. 3. Salvatore's cultured facade cracked, revealing the viper beneath. You'd start a war over some whore you bought at auction? The word, that ugly, reductive word, hung in the night air. On the monitor, Ava saw Dante's entire body go rigid. When he spoke again, his voice was so soft it was barely audible, but the menace in it made her skin crawl. 2 seconds. Then I stop counting and start killing. Salvatore laughed, but there was an edge to it now. You're bluffing. You wouldn't risk open conflict with the Calabrese family over... The gunshot split the night like thunder. Ava gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. On the monitors, she watched one of Salvatore's guards drop, a perfect shot to the shoulder that sent him spinning. The other guard scrambled, weapons rising, chaos erupting. That was a warning, Dante's voice cut through the confusion. The next one won't be. Get off my property. Now. For a moment, Salvatore's face showed genuine shock. Then fury. Then, and this was somehow more terrifying, calculation. He raised a hand, stopping his guards from returning fire. You've made your position clear, he said, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. But understand, Rinaldi, I don't forget insults, and I don't forgive them. That girl just became the most valuable target in Italy. Then you'd better pray you never get close enough to touch her, because if you do, if anyone associated with your family so much as looks at her wrong... Dante stepped forward, fully visible now in the floodlights, and the predatory grace in his movement was mesmerizing. I will dismantle everything you've built. I will destroy your operations, eliminate your lieutenants, and make your family name a cautionary tale. That's not a threat, Salvatore. That's a promise. The two men stared at each other across the gates, and even through the grainy security footage, Ava could feel the weight of their mutual hatred. Then Salvatore smiled, a terrible expression that held no warmth whatsoever. We'll see. Enjoy your prize while you can, Dante. Nothing precious lasts forever. He retreated to his vehicle, and within minutes the convoy was pulling away. But Ava could see the truth in the rigid set of Dante's shoulders, the way his men remained in defensive positions long after the cars disappeared. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. The intercom crackled again, and this time it was Dante's voice speaking directly to her. Ava, I know you're watching. I'm coming down. Don't open the door for anyone else. She waited, her heart hammering, watching the monitors as Dante moved through the villa. He stopped to give orders to his men, coordinated patrols, checked security systems. It took 20 minutes before he appeared on the monitor showing the corridor outside the safe room. He knocked 3 times, then spoke the code Marco had given her through the intercom. Ava opened the door. Dante stepped inside, and the door sealed behind him with that same final click. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. He looked different in tactical gear. Harder, more dangerous, every inch the criminal lord who commanded fear across 3 countries. But his eyes, when they met hers, held something other than violence. Are you hurt? He asked. Ava shook her head, not trusting her voice. Scared? Terrified. The admission came out barely above a whisper. Dante crossed the space between them in 2 strides and pulled her into his arms. The gesture was so unexpected, so completely at odds with the violence that had just unfolded, that Ava stood frozen for several heartbeats. Then his warmth, his solidity, the steady beat of his heart beneath her ear, it all crashed over her and she found herself clinging to him like a drowning woman to driftwood. I won't let them touch you, Dante said into her hair, his voice rough. I don't care what it costs, what I have to do. They'll never get close enough to hurt you. He called me a whore. Ava's voice broke on the word. He called me that. And you shot his guard. You threatened war. I would have shot him if I thought I could get away with it. Dante pulled back enough to cup her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. Do you understand what you've become, Ava? You're not just a possession anymore. You're a weakness, a vulnerability. Every enemy I've ever made now knows that hurting you is the fastest way to hurt me. Then let me go. The words tumbled out desperately. Send me away, somewhere safe, somewhere they can't find me. Problem solved. No. The refusal was absolute. Dante. No. I'm not letting you go. Not to protect you, not to protect myself, not for any reason. His thumbs traced her cheekbones with devastating gentleness. Don't you understand yet? I'd rather fight every family in Italy than spend one day knowing you're out there somewhere, unprotected, beyond my reach. That's insane. Probably. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. But insanity seems to be the theme of whatever this is between us. Whatever this is. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Ava should pull away, should remind him, and herself, that he'd bought her, that she was here against her will, that nothing about this situation was remotely normal or healthy. But her hands had fisted in his tactical vest, and she couldn't seem to make herself let go. What happens now? She whispered. Now, we prepare for war. Dante released her face, but his hands moved to her waist, keeping her close. Salvatore Calabrese is a vicious bastard who's been looking for an excuse to move against me for years. Tonight, I gave him one. He'll regroup, plan, and strike when he thinks I'm vulnerable. Because of me. Because he's greedy and stupid and has been wanting my territories since before you were born. You're just the catalyst. Dante's expression hardened. But he made a critical mistake tonight. He showed his hand. He told me exactly what he wants and what he's willing to do to get it. That gives me time to prepare. Prepare how? By making this villa impregnable. By calling in every favor I'm owed and eliminating every avenue he could use to reach you. By making it clear to every family, every organization, every 2-bit criminal from here to Moscow that you are under my protection and touching you means death. Dante's hands tightened on her waist. And by teaching you to protect yourself. Ava blinked. What? You can't stay helpless, Ava. Not anymore. Not when there's a target on your back. Dante gestured toward the weapon racks. Starting tomorrow, you learn to shoot. You learn self-defense. You learn every protocol for every type of emergency. I won't have you cowering in a safe room dependent on others for your survival. I don't want to learn to kill people. I'm not asking you to become an assassin. I'm asking you to survive if everything goes wrong, and I'm not there to protect you. Dante's voice softened slightly. Can you do that? For me? The request was manipulative, emotional blackmail wrapped in genuine concern. Ava should refuse, should draw a line somewhere, maintain some boundary between captor and captive. But the memory of Salvatore's cold eyes, his casual discussion of using her as leverage, the threat implicit in his parting words, all of it made the refusal die on her lips. Okay, she heard herself say. I'll learn. Something in Dante's expression shifted, relief mixed with something darker, more possessive. Good. We'll start in the morning. For now, he glanced at the monitors showing the villa's grounds, still lit up like a war zone. We wait here until my men finish security sweeps. Could be hours. Hours in a bunker? I've stayed in worse places. Dante finally released her, moving to the small kitchen area and opening what turned out to be a fully stocked refrigerator. Hungry? The question was so absurdly normal after everything that had just happened that Ava almost laughed. I don't know, maybe? Sit. I'll make something. Ava watched in surreal detachment as Dante Rinaldi, feared crime lord, the man who'd just threatened war over her, the ghost of Naples himself, pulled out ingredients and began preparing food with the easy competence of someone who'd done this many times. He moved through the small kitchen like he owned it, which he did, technically, and within minutes the space filled with the scent of garlic and olive oil. You cook? Ava asked, perching on one of the bar stools. I survive. There's a difference. Dante glanced at her over his shoulder. When I was younger, before I inherited my father's empire, I spent 3 months hiding in a safe house in Sardinia. Nothing to do but read, train, and learn not to starve. Cooking seemed practical. What were you hiding from? Enemies of my father who thought killing his heir would weaken his organization. They were wrong. Dante's tone was matter of fact, discussing attempted murder the way someone else might discuss a childhood illness. I emerged from hiding, eliminated everyone involved in the plot, and sent their heads to the families who'd sheltered them. After that, people stopped trying to kill me quite so openly. The casual brutality should have horrified Ava, and it did. But it also explained so much about the man who'd bought her, someone forged in violence, shaped by betrayal, for whom death was just another tool in an arsenal. Dante plated pasta with sauce that smelled incredible and set it before her with a fork. Eat. They ate in strange companionship, seated at the small bar with monitors showing armed guards patrolling the grounds above them. The pasta was simple but perfect. Aglio e olio, garlic and olive oil with a hint of red pepper flakes. Comfort food from someone who understood that sometimes the world was terrible and all you could do was eat something warm. Why did you really save those women? Ava asked suddenly. The ones from the auction. You said it was because they deserved better, but that's not the whole truth, is it? Dante took a sip of wine he'd poured for himself. Why do you think I did it? I think... Ava paused, trying to articulate the suspicion that had been growing in her mind. I think you saw yourself in them. Not literally, but you were sold once too, weren't you? Maybe not at an auction, but handed over to this life without a choice. Dante's expression went carefully neutral. My father groomed me for this empire from the moment I could walk. I never had the option of being anything else. That's what I mean. You were sold to this life the same way I was sold to you. And saving those women was your way of giving them the choice you never had. And yet I didn't give you that choice, Dante pointed out. I bought you, brought you here, kept you despite your protests. How do you reconcile that? I don't know. Ava set down her fork, her appetite fading. I don't know how to reconcile any of this. You're my captor and my protector. You've taken everything from me, but you've also given me things I never had. You threaten war to keep me safe, but you won't let me leave. She stopped, frustrated by her inability to categorize him. I'm a contradiction, Dante finished, a monster with occasional glimpses of conscience, a criminal who operates by his own warped code of honor. He stood, clearing their plates with efficient movements. But here's the truth, Ava Bellini. I am exactly what circumstances made me. And whether you hate me or understand me or something in between, the fact remains. You're mine, and I'm keeping you. What if I don't want to be kept anymore? The question made Dante pause. He set the plates in the sink, braced his hands on the counter, and when he turned back to face her, his expression was raw in a way she'd never seen. Then I'm in trouble, he said quietly. Because somewhere between the auction and tonight, between watching you paint in that studio and listening to you defend books at dinner, between your defiance and your strength, and the way you look at me like I'm simultaneously the worst and best thing that's ever happened to you, I stopped thinking of you as property. He moved closer, and Ava's breath caught. You're not mine because I bought you anymore, Ava. You're mine because I choose you, every day, every moment. And if you asked me to let you go, if you really wanted your freedom, his jaw clenched. I'm not sure I could do it. That's how far gone I am. The confession hung between them, dangerous and electric. Ava's heart hammered against her ribs. She should be horrified, should use this admission as ammunition, as leverage for her freedom. Instead, she heard herself say, "What if I don't know what I want anymore?" Then we figure it out together. Dante reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I know I'm not what you would have chosen. I know this isn't the life you imagined. But I also know that when Salvatore Calabrese threatened you tonight, when he reduced you to nothing with that word, you saw how far I'd go to defend you. Not my property, you. You would have started a war. I would have burned Italy to the ground. The statement was simple, factual, terrifying in its sincerity. That's what you mean to me now. That's what you've become. And if that makes me more of a monster, then so be it. Ava should run, should put distance between herself and this dangerous man who spoke of violence and possession like poetry. But her feet wouldn't move, and her hands reached up of their own accord, touching his face the way he'd touched hers 100 times. His skin was warm beneath her palms. The scar through his eyebrow was raised, a reminder of violence survived. And his eyes, those impossibly dark eyes that had terrified her on the auction platform, now held something that looked almost like vulnerability. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. I don't know how to want something from someone who took everything. Then don't decide tonight. Dante's hands covered hers, pressing her palms more firmly against his face. Just stay here with me. Stay safe, and we'll figure out the rest when the sun rises. They stood like that for a long moment, touching in the fluorescent light of an underground bunker while above them the world prepared for war. Then exhaustion crashed over Ava in a wave, and she swayed slightly. Dante caught her, guided her to the couch, and she found herself curled against his side with his arm around her shoulders. Sleep, he said softly. I'll watch the monitors. You need to sleep too. I'll sleep when I know you're safe. Ava wanted to argue, but her eyes were already closing. The last thing she remembered before sleep claimed her was the steady rhythm of Dante's breathing, the security of his arm around her, and the strange realization that for the first time since the auction, she felt something other than trapped. She felt chosen. When she woke, dawn light was filtering through the air vents, and Dante was still there, still watching the monitors, his arm still protective around her shoulders. The villa above was quiet now, the immediate threat past. But the war had just begun, and Ava Bellini, who had been an invisible literature student 3 weeks ago, was now the most valuable target in Italy, claimed by a man who would burn the world rather than let her go, and beginning to realize that maybe, terrifyingly, she didn't want him to. The next 3 weeks transformed the villa into a fortress, and Ava into someone she barely recognized. True to his word, Dante began her training the morning after Salvatore's threat. Marco taught her to shoot, starting with basic pistol safety and progressing until she could hit center mass at 20 yards. Alessandro drilled her on defensive tactics, pressure points, how to break a hold and create distance. Dante himself taught her the villa's emergency protocols, which walls concealed escape routes where weapons were hidden throughout the property, how to reach the safe room from any location in under 60 seconds. Again, Dante said, watching as Ava dismantled and reassembled a Glock for the 5th time that morning. They were in the villa's private gun range, a soundproofed room in the basement that spoke to exactly how prepared Dante was for violence. Faster this time. Ava's hands moved with increasing confidence, muscle memory taking over. 17 seconds. She was getting better. Good. Dante moved behind her, his body close enough that she could feel his warmth. Now load it and put 3 rounds in the target, center mass. Ava slid the magazine home, chambered around, and raised the weapon. The target, A paper silhouette 20 feet away had already taken significant damage from her earlier practice. She breathed out, squeezed the trigger 3 times in controlled succession, and watched the holes appear in a tight grouping over the heart. Better, Dante murmured in her ear, and the approval in his voice sent an unwelcome thrill through her. You're a natural. I hate that I'm good at this. Ava set the gun down, the weight of what she was learning settling heavy on her shoulders. I came here as a literature student. Now I'm training to kill people. You're training to survive. Dante's hands came to rest on her shoulders, turning her to face him. There's a difference. I hope to every power that exists that you never have to use these skills. But if something happens, if I'm not there and someone threatens you, I need to know you can protect yourself. The intensity in his dark eyes made Ava's breath catch. Over the past weeks, something had shifted between them. The boundaries that had defined captor and captive were blurring, replaced by something more complicated. She caught herself watching for him at meals, anticipating their evening conversations in his study, leaning into his touch when he adjusted her shooting stance or corrected her grip. It terrified her how much she'd begun to crave his presence. What if they come during a storm? She asked, voicing the fear that had been building. What if they wait for the worst possible moment? Then we'll be ready. Dante's thumb traced the line of her jaw. I've tripled security. Every approach to the villa is monitored. My best men are stationed in rotating shifts, and I've called in reinforcements from Naples, soldiers who've been with my family for generations. Salvatore won't get within a mile of you. You sound so certain. I am certain, because failure isn't an option I'm willing to consider. That afternoon, Ava was painting in her studio when Sophia appeared at the door with an expression that immediately put her on alert. Miss Bellini, there's someone here to see you. Ava set down her brush. Who? Isabella Romano. She says it's urgent. Ava found Dante's attorney in the main salon, pacing like a caged panther in a designer suit that probably cost more than Ava's university tuition. Isabella turned when she entered, and her expression was grim. We need to talk, Isabella said without preamble. Alone. Sophia, please close the doors, Ava said, surprised by the authority in her own voice. Somewhere in the past weeks, she'd stopped feeling like a prisoner and started feeling like someone who belonged here. The realization was disturbing. Once they were alone, Isabella crossed her arms. I'm going to be direct because we don't have time for niceties. Salvatore Calabrese is planning something big. My sources say he's been meeting with other families, building alliances, calling in favors. He's convinced them that Dante's weakness for you makes him vulnerable. I'm not his weakness. Ava stopped, uncertain how to finish that sentence. You're exactly his weakness, and everyone knows it. Isabella's tone wasn't cruel, just factual. 3 weeks ago, Dante Rinaldi would have crushed Salvatore without hesitation. Now he's distracted, protective, making decisions based on keeping you safe rather than strategic advantage. That makes him vulnerable, and that makes you the most valuable target in Italy. So what do you suggest? That I leave? I suggest you understand what you've become to him. Isabella moved closer, her expression intense. I've known Dante for 8 years. I've seen him build this empire, eliminate enemies, make decisions that would destroy weaker men. I've never, not once, seen him compromise his position for anyone. Until you. I didn't ask for any of this. No. You were brought here, and kept like a prize. I remember. Isabella's voice softened slightly. But somewhere along the way, you stopped being a possession and became something infinitely more dangerous. You became the thing he loves. The word hung in the air between them, shocking in its finality. Ava shook her head. He doesn't love me. He owns me. There's a difference. Is there? Because from where I'm standing, watching him restructure his entire security apparatus around protecting you, watching him turn down lucrative deals because they'd require him to leave the villa, watching him threaten war with one of the most powerful families in Italy. Isabella paused. I'm not seeing ownership, I'm seeing obsession. And Dante Rinaldi obsessed is either the most dangerous thing in the world or the most vulnerable. I haven't decided which yet. Before Ava could respond, the doors burst open and Dante strode in, his expression thunderous. Isabella, I didn't authorize this meeting. Since when do I need authorization to visit? Isabella turned to face him, unfazed by his anger. I was just explaining to Ava exactly what's at stake. She deserves to know. What she deserves is to not be filled with strategic concerns that aren't her responsibility. Dante's voice was cold. Leave. Now. Dante, I said leave. The command cracked through the room like a whip. Isabella held his gaze for a moment, then turned to Ava. Think about what I said. You have more power in this situation than you realize. Use it wisely. Then she swept from the room, her heels clicking against marble. The silence that followed was heavy. Dante stood with his back to Ava, his shoulders rigid with tension. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. What did she tell you? That Salvatore is building alliances. That I make you vulnerable. That I'm... Ava stopped, the words sticking in her throat. That you're what? Dante turned, and the intensity in his dark eyes stole her breath. That I'm the thing you love. The confession came out barely above a whisper. Dante crossed the distance between them in 3 strides, and suddenly his hands were framing her face, his forehead pressed to hers. Isabella talks too much, but she's not wrong. Ava's heart hammered against her ribs. Dante, I know it's insane. I know the circumstances are impossible. I bought you at an auction, brought you here as property, kept you in a gilded cage. By every measure, I'm the villain in this story. His thumbs traced her cheekbones with devastating gentleness. But somewhere between your defiance and your strength, somewhere between watching you paint and listening to you argue about literature, somewhere between terror and trust, I fell completely, irrevocably in love with you. The words should have made her angry, should have reminded her of everything that was wrong about this situation. Instead, Ava felt something crack open in her chest, a dam breaking, releasing emotions she'd been trying to suppress for weeks. I hate that I feel this way, she whispered. I hate that I look for you in every room. I hate that your touch feels like safety instead of captivity. I hate that when you threatened war for me, some terrible part of me felt chosen, Dante finished, valued, protected. Yes, the admission hurt. How can I feel this way about someone who owns me? You don't belong to me anymore, Ava. You haven't for weeks. Dante pulled back enough to meet her eyes. The moment I started caring more about your happiness than my possession, the moment I began making decisions based on your safety rather than strategic advantage, that's when you stopped being property and became everything. Then let me go. The challenge was weak and they both knew it. I can't. Not because you're mine, but because I'm yours. Dante's hands trembled slightly against her face. Do you understand what you've done to me? I would burn my empire to ash to keep you safe. I would compromise everything I've built for one of your smiles. I'm completely undone by a literature student who was supposed to be nothing more than a transaction. Ava's hands came up to cover his, pressing his palms more firmly against her face. This is insane. I know. You bought me like property. I know. I should hate you. I know. Dante's voice dropped to barely audible. But do you? Ava searched his face. Those sharp features that had terrified her on the auction platform, the scar through his eyebrow that told stories of violence survived, the dark eyes that now held something raw and vulnerable. She thought about the past weeks, the transformation from captor to protector, the way he listened when she talked about her dreams, the studio he'd built because he wanted her to be happy, the women he'd saved because he understood what it meant to be sold. No, she whispered. I don't hate you. I think... The words caught in her throat, terrifying in their implications. I think I might love you too, and I don't know what to do with that. Dante's kiss was both answer and question, gentle at first, then deeper, carrying weeks of suppressed desire and impossible emotion. Ava kissed him back, her hands fisting in his shirt, all the walls she'd built crumbling under the weight of feelings too powerful to deny. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dante rested his forehead against hers. We'll figure this out. Together. I promise you. The explosion shattered the windows. Glass erupted inward in a spray of deadly shards. Dante's body covered Ava's instantly, bearing her to the floor as the world dissolved into chaos. Alarms screamed. Somewhere distant, automatic gunfire rattled like thunder. Dante was shouting into his phone in rapid Italian, his body still shielding her from the worst of the debris. Stay down! He pulled her behind the heavy sofa as another explosion rocked the villa. They're coming through the south perimeter. Marco, report! Ava's ears rang, her hands bleeding from glass cuts she didn't remember receiving. Through the shattered windows, she could see smoke rising from the gardens, figures moving through the darkness. Too many figures, armed and advancing with military precision. "How many?" Dante demanded into his phone. His face went pale at the answer. "Fall back to secondary positions. Protect the main house. And get reinforcements here now. I don't care what it costs. Just get them here." "Dante, what's happening?" "Salvatore brought an army." Dante hauled her to her feet, his hand ironed tight around her wrist. 30, maybe 40 men. He's not trying to capture you anymore. He's trying to burn this whole place down with both of us inside it. They ran through corridors filling with smoke, past windows where Dante's men exchanged fire with invaders, toward the hidden staircase that led to the safe room. Marco appeared from a side hallway, blood streaming from a cut on his temple. "East Wing is compromised," he reported. "They're pushing hard toward the main house. We can hold them maybe 10 minutes. Get her to the safe room," Dante ordered. "I'm going to the armory." "No!" Ava grabbed his arm. "You said we'd do this together. You promised—" "Ava, listen to me." Dante gripped her shoulders, his eyes intense. "I need you safe. I can't fight effectively if I'm worried about you getting hit by a stray bullet. Please, go with Marco. Let me end this." Another explosion, closer this time. The villa shuddered, and somewhere above them, something heavy crashed down. Smoke was getting thicker, making breathing difficult. "I love you," Ava said desperately. "Don't you dare die." "I love you too, which is why I'm not letting Salvatore win." Dante kissed her hard and fast. "Go, now." Marco pulled her away down the familiar staircase into the belly of the villa. But halfway down, he stopped abruptly. No, they can't have... Ava followed his gaze and her blood turned to ice. The corridor below was filling with water, pouring from broken pipes somewhere in the infrastructure. The safe room door stood half submerged, and even from here she could see it would be impossible to reach without swimming through contaminated water in the dark. "Alternate plan," Marco said grimly. "The cliffs. There's an old smuggler's path down to a boat dock. If we can reach it..." "You're not going anywhere," the voice came from behind them. Ava and Marco spun to find 3 men blocking the staircase. Calabrese soldiers, weapons raised, smiling like predators who'd just cornered wounded prey. Marco's gun came up, but he was outnumbered and wounded. "Run!" he shouted at Ava. "The cliffs! Find the path marked with 3 stones!" The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. Marco fell, and Ava screamed. She bolted past the water deeper into the villa's infrastructure, her bare feet slapping against stone as the men pursued. Behind her, she heard them laughing. They were playing with her, letting her run because they knew she was trapped. Ava burst through a door and found herself in the wine cellar, the room with the photographs, dead end, nowhere to go. She grabbed the heaviest bottle she could find, her hands shaking, every training session with Dante flooding through her mind. Center mass. Breathe, squeeze, don't pull. But she didn't have a gun. She had a bottle of wine and pure terror. The door opened. 2 men entered, their weapons lowered because they knew she wasn't a threat. "Salvatore wants you alive," one said in accented English. "Come quietly. It'll be easier." "Go to hell." Ava's voice shook but held. "Brave. Stupid, but brave." The man stepped closer. "Drop the bottle, girl. You're coming with..." The shot took him in the chest, punching him backward. The second man spun, his weapon rising, but another shot dropped him before he could fire. Ava stood frozen, the wine bottle still clutched in her hands, as Dante emerged from the shadows. He looked like something from a nightmare, covered in ash and blood, his tactical gear torn, a rifle in his hands and death in his eyes. But when he saw her, when their gazes met across the wine cellar, the murderous rage softened into something that looked almost like relief. "Are you hurt?" he asked, moving to her. "Marco. They shot Marco. He's alive. Wounded, but alive. My men got to him." Dante pulled her against his chest, and she could feel his heart racing. "I thought I'd lost you. When I heard you scream..." Another explosion, closer this time. The villa groaned, and dust rained from the ceiling. Dante grabbed her hand. "We have to move. The whole place is coming down." They ran through corridors Ava had never seen, past rooms she didn't know existed, toward a section of wall that Dante opened with a hidden switch. Beyond was a tunnel carved into the cliff itself, narrow, dark, smelling of sea salt and age. "Where does this lead?" Ava gasped as they ran. The old boat dock. My grandfather built this as an escape route during the war. Come on. The tunnel sloped downward sharply, and Ava could hear the ocean now, the crash of waves against rocks, getting louder with every step. Behind them, the sounds of battle continued, gunfire, shouting, more explosions that made the tunnel shake. Then, shockingly, silence. They emerged onto a wooden platform built into the cliff face, protected from view by an overhang of rock. A sleek powerboat waited, secured to ancient posts. Dante hauled Ava aboard and moved to start the engine. It wouldn't catch. No, 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 no. Dante tried again, and the engine turned over but wouldn't start. They must have sabotaged it. They knew about the escape route. Ava looked up at the cliffs above them. Figures were appearing at the top, Salvatore's men, weapons raised. They were trapped. Nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. Dante, she whispered. He turned, saw what she saw, and his expression hardened into something terrible and final. He pulled a pistol from his tactical vest and pressed it into her hands. If they take me, if they kill me, you use this on yourself. Do you understand? Don't let them capture you. Promise me. No. Ava shoved the gun back at him. We're not doing this. We're not giving up. Ava, you said we'd figure this out together. Her voice cracked. You said you loved me. Was that a lie? Of course not. Then we survive together or we don't survive at all. But I'm not going out cowering on a boat waiting for death. Ava grabbed the rifle Dante had dropped and raised it toward the cliffs, her hands steady, despite the terror coursing through her. You taught me to fight, so let's fight. Dante stared at her for one endless moment. Then something shifted in his expression. Acceptance, maybe, or pride, or love so fierce it bordered on madness. He pulled his own weapon and stood beside her, both of them facing the cliff where death waited. Together, then, he said quietly. The figures above raised their weapons. Ava closed her eyes, said a silent goodbye to the dreams she'd never fulfill, the books she'd never write, the life she'd almost had. Dante's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining. The sound that split the air wasn't gunfire. It was a helicopter. No, multiple helicopters, appearing over the cliff edge like mechanical angels. Searchlights blazed down, illuminating Salvatore's men, and a voice boomed through a loudspeaker in Italian. Ava didn't understand the words, but she understood the effect. The men on the cliff lowered their weapons, hands rising in surrender. What's happening? She gasped. Cavalry. Dante's voice was rough with disbelief. I called in every favor, contacted every alliance. They came. They actually came. Over the next hour, Ava watched from the boat as Dante's reinforcements, soldiers from Naples, Rome, even as far as Sicily, systematically secured the villa and rounded up Salvatore's forces. The battle was over. Somehow, impossibly, they'd survived. Dante helped Ava back up the cliff path, through the tunnel, and into what remained of the villa. The damage was extensive, shattered windows, scorched walls, entire sections that would need rebuilding, but it was still standing. They were still standing. They found Salvatore in the main hall, on his knees with his hands zip-tied behind his back, surrounded by at least a dozen weapons pointed at his head. He looked up as Dante approached, and his cultured facade had completely shattered, revealing only hatred beneath. You should have taken my offer, he spat. You should have given me the girl and saved yourself this war. Dante's expression was colder than Ava had ever seen it. I told you what would happen if you came for her. You chose not to believe me. He gestured to his men. Take him to the authorities. Make sure every agency in Italy knows about tonight, the assault, the explosives, the attempted murder. Let them add it to his existing crimes. You're handing me to the police? Salvatore laughed bitterly. Since when does Dante Rinaldi rely on legal justice? Since I realize my empire is worth less than her happiness. Dante's hand came to rest on Ava's shoulder. And she doesn't need to watch me execute you to understand what you mean to me. She already knows. As Salvatore was dragged away, still shouting threats and curses, Dante turned to Ava. In the wreckage of his villa, covered in ash and blood, he looked like a king surveying a battlefield, victorious but at terrible cost. It's over, he said quietly. Salvatore's organization will crumble without him. The other families will back off rather than risk the same fate. You're safe now. What about your empire? Isabella said you were compromising everything for me. I was. I did. Dante's hands framed her face. And I'd do it again, every time. Because somewhere in these past weeks, I stopped being the man who valued power above all else and became someone who values you above everything. Ava's vision blurred with tears. What happens now? Now? Dante's thumb traced her cheekbone. Now I give you a choice. A real one, not coerced or forced. You can leave. I'll set you up anywhere in the world, money, security, a new life far from this violence. Or you can stay. Not as property, not as a possession, but as my partner, my equal, the woman I love more than my own life. The choice should have been obvious. She should choose freedom, should run from this dangerous man and his violent world. But Ava thought about the past weeks, the transformation she'd undergone from invisible girl to someone who could stand on a boat facing death and choose to fight. She thought about Dante's confession in the salon, his body covering hers during the explosion, the way he'd handed her a weapon and stood beside her at the end rather than face death apart. If I stay, she said slowly, things change. No more tracking bracelets, no more restrictions. I'm not a captive or a pet or a prize. Agreed. I want to write. I want to use my experiences to tell stories that matter, even if they expose the ugliness of how we met. Write whatever truth you need to tell. And I want... Ava stopped, her heart racing. I want you to dismantle the darker parts of this empire. No more human trafficking, no more dealing with men who see people as commodities. Use your power to help instead of hurt. Dante was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. It'll take time. There are entanglements, obligations. But yes, I'll do it. For you, I'll become someone different. Not different, Ava corrected. Better. The man you could be if you chose mercy over violence. And if I do all that, if I change my empire and give you freedom and spend the rest of my life proving I'm worthy of your love, will you stay? Ava looked around the damaged villa at the life she'd been forced into that had somehow become the life she chose. She thought about returning to Milan, to her small apartment and invisible existence, and realized that girl no longer existed. She'd been forged into someone new, someone stronger, braver, more certain of her own worth. I'll stay, she whispered. Not because I'm yours, because you're mine. Dante's kiss was a promise and a beginning, tender despite the violence they'd just survived, hopeful despite the darkness in both their pasts. When they finally broke apart, the sun was rising over the Mediterranean, painting the wreckage in shades of gold and rose. 6 months later, Ava stood in a newly renovated wing of the villa, surveying the space that had once been storage and was now a foundation office, the Rinaldi Foundation, dedicated to helping victims of human trafficking. The women Dante had rescued from the auction served as the first board members, each bringing their own expertise, their own passion, their own understanding of what it meant to be bought and sold. Dante approached from behind, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. The final permits came through. We can open next month. And the other operations? Ava asked. Dissolved or transferred to legitimate businesses. It's done. My empire is cleaner than it's been in 3 generations. He paused. Though I suspect that means I'm a terrible disappointment to my criminal ancestors. I suspect they'd be proud you chose to evolve. Ava turned in his arms, her hand coming to rest on the slight swell of her abdomen, barely visible yet, but unmistakable. Speaking of evolution, Dante's expression transformed, the hardened criminal lord disappearing entirely, replaced by pure wonder. Are you certain? I took 4 tests this morning. I'm certain. He dropped to his knees, his hands coming to rest gently on her stomach, his forehead pressing against the small curve. A baby. We're having a baby. Are you scared? Ava asked, running her fingers through his dark hair. Terrified. Dante looked up at her and his eyes were suspiciously bright, but also happier than I've ever been. More hopeful. Like maybe the violence and darkness in my past doesn't have to define what comes next. It doesn't. We get to write our own story from here. Ava pulled him to his feet. The girl bought at auction and the crime lord who saved her. The impossible love that survived war and violence and transformation. The family built from ashes and choice. And this baby? Dante's hand covered hers on her stomach. This baby gets to grow up knowing they were wanted, chosen, loved from the moment we knew they existed. Everything we weren't. 4 months later, on a morning that dawned clear and golden over the Mediterranean, their daughter was born. Dante held her with trembling hands. This man who'd built an empire through violence, who'd paid $100 million for the woman he loved, who'd burned his old life to ash to build something better. "She's perfect," he whispered, tears streaming down his face as the baby gripped his finger with impossible strength. Ava, exhausted but radiant, watched her husband. They'd married quietly 2 months earlier, a simple ceremony on the cliffs, cradle their daughter with a tenderness that still sometimes took her breath away. "What should we name her?" she asked. Dante looked up, and the love in his eyes was so fierce it bordered on painful. "Hope. We'll name her Hope, because she represents everything we've become, proof that even the darkest beginnings can lead to light." Ava smiled through her own tears. "Hope Rinaldi. I like it." As sunrise painted the hospital room in shades of gold, as Hope made soft sounds against her father's chest, as the medical staff bustled around them with quiet efficiency, Ava thought about the journey that had brought them here, the auction platform where her old life ended, the villa that had been prison and sanctuary both, the transformation from captor and captive to partners facing the world together. It wasn't a traditional love story. It wasn't even a particularly sane one, but it was theirs, built from impossible circumstances, strengthened by choosing each other every day, redeemed by their determination to be better than their worst moments. "I love you," Dante said, looking between his wife and daughter with wonder. "Both of you. More than my empire, more than my legacy, more than my own life. You're everything now." "We love you too," Ava replied, reaching out to touch Hope's soft cheek. "And we're going to teach this little girl that she can be anything she chooses, that she's never invisible, never powerless, never owned by anyone's expectations. Except maybe owned by her parents' completely unreasonable adoration," Dante added with a smile that transformed his usually severe face. Except that. Years later, when Hope was old enough to ask, they would tell her the truth. Not a sanitized fairy tale, but the real story, complicated and dark and ultimately redemptive. They would tell her about the auction, about the violence and fear, about the transformation that came from choosing love over hate, mercy over revenge, hope over despair. And they would tell her that she was born from the ashes of their old lives, the proof that even the most broken people could build something beautiful if they had the courage to change. But for now, in the golden light of that Mediterranean morning, Dante Rinaldi and Ava Bellini held their daughter and each other, and let themselves believe in impossible things. In redemption earned through action, in love that survived catastrophic beginnings, in families built from choice rather than blood, in hope, the end.